In 1949, a teenage boy began experiencing something his family could not explain. Scratching came from the walls. His bed reportedly shook. And then, according to witnesses, something even stranger began. A priest was called. What happened over the following weeks became one of the most famous alleged cases of demonic possession in American history, a case so unsettling it would later inspire a novel, and then a film, that changed horror forever. Was this really a case of possession? Or was there another explanation? The story reportedly begins in January 1949, in a quiet suburb outside Washington, D.C. A 13-year-old boy, later given the pseudonym Roland Doe, or sometimes Robbie Doe, to protect his identity, was living an ordinary life with his family. Then, according to family accounts, strange things started happening around him. Scratching sounds, reportedly coming from inside the walls. Objects said to move without explanation. And most disturbing of all, the boy's bed allegedly shook on its own, sometimes violently enough that family members claimed to witness it firsthand. The family later said the boy had been introduced to a Ouija board by a relative shortly before the disturbances began. It's important to say clearly, this connection was something the family believed, not something that was ever proven. But at the time, it gave them a place to point to. A beginning. A reason to be afraid. Word of the strange events spread quietly through the family and their church community. And as the disturbances continued, so did the fear. Before anyone mentioned the word exorcism, the family reportedly did what most families would do. They sought help from doctors. According to later accounts, the boy was examined by physicians and psychiatrists, searching for a medical or psychological explanation. Some historical summaries suggest possible diagnoses were considered, ranging from stress-related conditions to more serious psychiatric explanations. No conclusive medical cause was ever publicly confirmed. This is where the case becomes genuinely difficult to unravel. On one side, a family describing physical phenomena they said defied explanation. On the other, professionals trying to find a grounded, medical reason for a disturbed teenager's behavior. But the family's fear kept growing. And when medicine didn't offer an answer that satisfied them, they turned toward their faith instead. Eventually, the family reached out to a Lutheran pastor, and later, according to historical accounts, to Catholic clergy. That decision would take the boy on a journey, from his home outside Washington, D.C., to St. Louis, Missouri, where relatives lived, and where the case would take its darkest turn. In St. Louis, the family connected with a Jesuit priest named Father Raymond Bishop. According to accounts, Bishop witnessed behavior in the boy that deeply disturbed him, enough that he began keeping a detailed diary of what he observed. That diary would later become one of the most important, and most debated, pieces of evidence in the entire case. Bishop brought in another Jesuit, Father William Blatty, a respected and experienced priest. According to historical accounts, Blatty was cautious. The Catholic Church does not take the process of exorcism lightly, and it requires careful investigation before any ritual is approved. This is where the story shifts from a family's private ordeal into something the Church itself became formally involved in. According to church procedure at the time, a priest requesting an exorcism needed permission from church authorities, based on evidence that ordinary medical and psychological explanations had been ruled out. Historical accounts indicate that Blatty and Bishop believed they had witnessed enough to request that permission, and it was reportedly granted. A young Jesuit named Father Walter Halloran was also brought in to assist, largely because of the physical demands the priest said the rituals involved. What followed, according to the priest's own accounts and Bishop's diary, took place over several weeks in early 1949, both in St. Louis and briefly back in the boy's hometown. The accounts describe intense, disturbing scenes. The boy reportedly screamed during the rituals. He allegedly fought against the priest physically, at times requiring several grown men to restrain him. Witnesses claimed to hear unusual voices coming from him. Scratches reportedly appeared on his skin. Some accounts even describe objects in the room appearing to move. It's important to be clear about what these claims actually are. They come primarily from the priests involved, particularly Bishop's diary, and from family members present at the time. There is no independent scientific documentation of these events. No cameras. No outside medical observers recording what happened in real time. What exists is testimony, sincere, detailed, but still testimony. One of the most talked about details from Bishop's diary involves marks that reportedly appeared on the boy's body during the ordeal, including, according to the diary, something resembling the word hell scratched into his skin. To the priests, this was taken as deeply significant, a sign, in their belief system, that something beyond the boy himself was responsible. But skeptics point to something simpler. A distressed teenager, alone with intense psychological and physical stress, is physically capable of scratching his own skin, consciously or not. There is no verified way to determine, more than 70 years later, exactly how those marks appeared. So what exactly happened in that room? The honest answer is, we don't fully know. We only have the written word of the people who were there. Perhaps the most dangerous moment in the entire case reportedly took place not in a bedroom, but on a bluff overlooking the Mississippi River, at a Jesuit retreat facility called the Election Brothers Hospital, where the boy was staying during part of the ordeal. According to accounts from Father Halloran, the boy, during one of the more violent episodes, broke free and ran toward the bluff. Halloran, one of the younger and physically stronger priests present, reportedly caught him before he reached the edge. Whether this moment reflected a genuine attempt at self-harm, a panic response, or something else entirely, isn't something that can be verified today. What is clear from every account is that by this point, the situation had become physically dangerous, for the boy, and for the priests trying to help him. The rituals continued, night after night for weeks. Then came April 18, 1949, the date historical accounts point to as the final stage of the case. According to Bishop's diary and later retellings, the final ritual was intense, even by the standards of the previous weeks. And then, according to the priests present, something shifted. The boy reportedly grew calm. Historical accounts describe a voice, one the priests attributed to the entity they believed they were confronting, reportedly saying something to the effect of, "He's gone," before the boy became still and, according to those present, appeared to return to himself. Some retellings connect this moment to a reported vision the boy described involving Saint Michael the Archangel, a figure associated in Catholic tradition with spiritual warfare against evil. To be clear, none of this confirms that a demonic entity was expelled. It reflects what the people in the room, at that time, believed they experienced. For years, the case remained relatively private, known mostly within Catholic circles and the family's community. Then, a reporter for the Washington Post got hold of the story, and in the months that followed, versions of the case reached a wider public, often exaggerated, sensationalized, and stripped of the careful hedging the priests themselves had used in their own notes. Decades later, a novelist named William Peter Blatty came across a version of the story while he was a student. It stayed with him. In 1971, he published a novel loosely inspired by these events, The Exorcist. 2 years later, it became one of the most influential horror films ever made, changing the genre permanently and introducing millions of people to a fictionalized echo of what had reportedly happened to one teenage boy in 1949. In behavior. To those present, the case represented something they sincerely believed was beyond ordinary explanation. A conclusion the Catholic Church does not reach lightly, given how rigorously it investigates such claims before approving an exorcism. But the skeptical view raises real, important questions. There is no scientific evidence that demonic possession exists as a supernatural phenomenon. Later investigators, most notably researcher Mark Opsasnik in the 1990s, tracked down local records, neighbors, and contemporaries of the boy, and argued that key details of the popularized story, including where events reportedly occurred and how severe they truly were, may have been altered or exaggerated over decades of retelling. Opsasnik's research suggested a more psychological explanation was plausible: a troubled, attention-seeking child, a family under emotional strain, and a story that grew larger with each retelling. neither side can fully prove their case. And that, more than anything, is why this story has endured for over 70 years. As for the boy at the center of it all, historical accounts suggest he grew up, moved away from public attention, and reportedly lived an ordinary adult life, largely shielded from the story that had made him famous without his consent. His identity remains protected to this day, out of respect for his privacy. One teenager. A few terrifying weeks. A group of priests who believed they were facing something beyond explanation. And a story that would eventually inspire one of the most famous horror films ever made. But whether something supernatural truly entered that bedroom in 1949, or whether fear, belief, and human behavior created the mystery, is something we may never fully know. Because sometimes the most disturbing stories aren't the ones with clear answers. They're the ones where the evidence ends and the questions begin.